Alright everybody, Kevin Keith here again. This is going to be part one of what I'm going to call the MSA Exposé. We might as well start at the beginning. But before we do that, I'd just like to say that this is not a disgruntled former employee who's trying to knock what I think is a pretty successful program on the whole. It was an honor to work there, and it was a privilege to work there. And I hope that it will return itself to its original mission, which I hope to explain in the course of this video and the videos thereafter. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. I believe that the taxpayers of Iberville Parish, and frankly the surrounding parishes, and the powers that be at the State Department of Education, deserve an insider's view of the MSA and how it operates, how it's set up, and how it's funded, which basically will amount to fraud. But before we get into the whole nuts and bolts of it, I think it's important for the people who will eventually hear this video to understand the beginnings of the school. I do this my heart's heavy. I don't want to do this, but these are things that are necessary to tell people. I'm a lifelong resident of Iberville Parish, and I think that the people of the parish, many of whom have kids at that school, this is something for everybody to know. It's not talked about, but it needs to be known. So how did MSA come about? Back in the early 2000s, we had a superintendent in Iberville Parish named Mr. Charles Bujal, who was a really good superintendent. He was a kind of a don't rock the boat kind of guy. He was a good superintendent in that way. He kept everything running and running on time. In 2003, he retired. Maybe it was 2004, but I think it was 2003. He retired, and the school board, which was outrageously, insanely composed of 15 members, voted on his replacement. They voted for Mr. Martin Bera, B-E-R-A, who was then, I think, the principal in, San Antonio or somewhere out there in Texas. But Mr. Bera was a nice man. He was a compliant man. He was exactly the man that this raucous and politically juvenile school board wanted. He was a manipulatable man. I know that's not really a word, but I think it pretty well conveys the context. He was a yes man. He wasn't a controversial stick-up-for-himself man. So they hired him on, and boy, chaos ensued. From the period from 2003 to 2007, education, at least public education in Iberville Parish, really began to take a bad shellacking. Discipline in the schools was completely out of control. Mr. Bera and some of his lackeys at the school board office did their best to undermine successful faculties, particularly at Plaquemine High. They took some of the best teachers that they had there, transferred them to other schools. They forced some of the teachers that were there for a long time but were still very effective teachers. They forced some of them into early retirement because they wouldn't go along with their new programs, their new ideas for discipline and for education policies, things like this. It was really a wreck. It was really a shambles what they did. And Mr. Bera, it was rumored, was drunk on the job quite often. He was a nice man, like I said, but look, both of my parents worked at the school board office. I can attest that maybe he wasn't drunk. I won't make that accusation, but he was certainly very flush in the cheeks. And the school system was really going down. Enrollment was dropping. People were voting with their feet. They were trying to spend the money or save the money to spend the money to send their kids to some local private schools to get them out of Iberville Parish public schools. It was a bad situation. Mr. Bera knew that his goose was cooked. And so he announced his retirement at the end of his contract. Well, when Mr. Barrow retired, of course, the school board goes out looking for a new superintendent. And one of the guys who applies for the job is Dr. P. Edward Consien, who came to Iberville Parish from St. James, where he was superintendent. Previously, he had been the superintendent of Assumption Parish. Dr. Consien applies for the job, and he comes to the job very highly recommended. He's like the state superintendent of the year. He's got quite an string of accomplishments under his belt. The board votes for him, but they vote for him to come in and straighten up the mess that had become Iberville Parish Public Schools. But he says, look, it's two or none. You have to take my sidekick man, my right-hand man with me, or I'm not coming. So the board enters into contracts with the right-hand man. His name would be Elvis Cavalier, to come on board right along with him. To basically, with the two of them, the idea was that they were going to be miracle workers, that they were going to come into Iberville Parish and straighten out a flailing and failing public school system that was on the verge of being ranked as an F district. It was routinely getting grades of D from state accountability authorities. They were expected to come in and fix this situation. Well, in 2007, Consien gets hired on, and he starts making noise about something called a master plan. By this point, I'm also an employee at the school board. I was running the print shop back there, so guess what I had access to? Anytime that he wanted a copy of the master plan run off, I was the man who got to see it. He was making this master plan in conjunction with some consultants, the most prominent of which was Miss Mary Edwards, who was also one of his principals down in St. James Parish, who had recently retired and going into education consulting, a very lucrative career. People, if you don't know it, don't buy teachers whenever they tell you that teaching doesn't pay. All that you have to do is go a little bit farther than just being a mere teacher, and you'll be a very wealthy individual, believe me. Ask Mary Edwards. Well, they put together this big master plan, and finally by about January of 2008, it's all complete. They've had a series of meetings and a couple of public hearings here and there, and the master plan is put together. And the real crux of the master plan is to take a large tax increase to the voters, 31 mills tax increase. A 20-year, 31 mil tax increase to the voters of Iberville Parish for the purpose, it's got three purposes, for the purpose of reorganizing and reorienting Iberville Parish Public Schools. The first purpose of the 31 mills is to raise the pay of school employees. Everybody from the lunch lady to teachers to principals to supervisors at the central office. Pretty much an across-the-board pay increase, and a very sizable one, a very healthy one. If the 31 mil tax passes in 2008, then Iberville Parish teachers will be the highest paid teachers in Louisiana. Go from being somewhere middle in the pack to being the highest. This is the idea as it's presented to the people, is that this is going to attract the best and most qualified teachers to Iberville Parish to work. The second purpose was to remodel existing schools, to upgrade them and their facilities, and to bring them into the more modern age. And the third purpose, and the real heart of it, was to establish a small academy for between 300 to 500 students. And I know this, I read the damn document. I ran off the copies. Somewhere out on Enterprise Boulevard in some undeveloped part of town, a small academy, build it from the ground up, where the elite students of the parish would be able to attend school in a different type of educational environment that would be a little bit non-traditional, but would have the absolute best faculty and provide a very challenging, pretty hardcore, pretty rigorous education to, again, a pretty small student body of between 300 and 500 students. The academy would cost a few $1,000,000 to build and staff, but it was sort of like presented, I guess you could say, like a bait on a hook, so to speak. This was the real pitch to voters. We need an academy. We need an alternative education program that doesn't involve, that isn't, the ops center, that isn't a place where you send the bad kids. No, we need a place for the very best and brightest, because frankly, Iberville Parish, and this is what was said at the school board office, people, this is what was said behind the scenes. The fact was that the academy had to be established to draw back the white students who had left Iberville Parish public schools to go to St. John, or to go to Redemptorist, or to go to Episcopal, or Catholic High, or St. Joseph's Academy, etc. Or maybe to lie about where they actually live and go to Bruley. This was to draw these kids back because we needed their test scores. Without them coming back in the Iberville Parish at the academy that was going to be built, the small academy, and receiving a pretty kick-in-the-butt education, a very good education, if they didn't come back to the district, then the district was in real danger of facing state takeover. So you go to the voters, right, and you present it to them as, we want to increase the educational opportunities for your children. We want to do whatever, fill in the blank, education newspeak, better opportunities, safe and nurturing environment, non-traditional, cutting-edge, innovative education techniques, etc., immersive environment. All these phrases were thrown out there to voters to get them to approve this massive property tax increase that was proposed in the master plan. Now, voters weren't too hot on the idea, but there was one thing that the school board could mobilize that not many other political organizations can. In almost any small parish or county, one of the biggest employers is the local school district, you see. With the carrot being this massive, huge pay increase for teachers and lunch ladies and everybody who's affiliated with the system, right? All of these people are from Iberville Parish. Well, most of the people are anyhow, and they've got family. So the idea was, hey, let's get as much turnout for the early vote among the teachers' families as we possibly can, and the other employees' families as we possibly can, and get them to vote yes by early voting yes in favor of giving their loved one a pay raise, right? Well, the strategy narrowly worked, and on March 8th, 2008, the 31 mil proposed tax passed by a margin of like 54% to 46%, basically. All right. The total was 3,800 votes to 3,200 votes. Now, the thing about this was that on election day, March 8th, the millage failed. It was narrowly defeated on the actual election day, but the strategy of making all these people's family members turn out to vote paid off very well, because the early vote was something like 900 to 150 or something like that. And so you see the 600 about neighborhood margin of victory more than came from the early vote, which was of course done by loved ones who wanted their family members to get a good raise. So the academy is approved, and at the helm of the academy is to be the right-hand man, Mr. Elvis Cavalier, who was recently, before he came to Iberville Parish, the director of the Science, Math, and Arts Academy in St. James Parish. Mr. Cavalier is going to be now the director of the Math, Science, and Arts Academy, as it's going to be called in Iberville Parish. He's not a very creative man. So he had SMA in St. James Parish. He's going to have MSA in Iberville Parish. Iberville Parish is a little bit of a quirk of geography. You have a west side of the river and an east side of the river being the Mississippi River here in Iberville Parish. So you had to have an East Academy and a West Academy because we don't have a bridge to connect the two sides. So whatever you do on the west side, you have to do on the east side. It makes it much more expensive. But he's the guy who's going to be at the head of it all. Well, very quickly it became obvious that the voters were lied to, or at least about the plans for the academy. The academy very quickly changes from being a small place built out on the outskirts of town for the best and brightest students to being something that could potentially have a lot more room for growth. Because over the summer of 2008, the decision was made by the school board, at the superintendent's recommendation, to not build the small campus out on Enterprise Boulevard, but instead move the academy program to what had been E.J. Gay Middle School. This was in part precipitated by a fight, a gang fight that had happened at E.J. Gay not too long after Conscian had become superintendent. It attracted a lot of media attention. They were at the school board. They were interviewing the superintendent about the gang fight. I think that kind of soured him on E.J. Gay to begin with. But anyways, long story short, Academy no longer on Enterprise Boulevard on the outskirts of town. Now it's going to be housed at a fairly large, capacious campus, right, with plenty of room for growth. And well, that was the beginning of the academy program, a 31 mil tax that was designed specifically in regards to the academy to draw back the higher scoring white students who had fled from the district over the preceding 20 years, really, but especially accelerated during the chaotic Martin Barra era. A little bit of a rhyme there, but it's what it was. Of 2003 to 2007, this was to reverse that trend and draw them back. But already at the very beginning of the establishing of the academy program, it was sold to us under false pretenses. And the promises that they made about what they were going to do and where they were going to do it were broken before the first desk was put into the first academy classroom. And that would be a trend that would unfortunately continue throughout the entire existence of the program up to the current day, and that's what makes me sad to have to tell the people of this parish. So the next update, we're going to be talking about not just the beginnings of the academy, but the early years and the early successes of the academy program. Look for that update soon. Thanks.